All right, so are you ready to dive into this world of manipulation and dark psychology and NLP?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
All right, so based on what you sent me, these audiobook excerpts, this is going to be really fascinating. We're going to be like decoding the human psyche, right? Trying to figure out how to spot these red flags and maybe even pick up some positive persuasion skills.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a superpower, you know?
Yeah.
Like you understand why people are doing things, especially when they're trying to control you or harm you. It really gives you an advantage in navigating the social world.
For sure, for sure. The audiobook starts out by explaining this whole concept of dark psychology, which is not for the faint of heart. Like, it's really about the motivations behind actions that are designed to, like, harm other people or control them. And it kind of immediately links it to these 3 personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
Ooh, spooky.
Right.
Yeah, those are some intense personality traits.
It's like chills down your spine.
Yeah, it's like peering into the shadow of human nature, you know, the darker side of human nature. You know, and these traits are often associated with criminal behavior, but they can also show up, you know, in our everyday relationships. You know, you take narcissism, for example. We throw that word around a lot, but it's actually more complex than that. It's not just about vanity. It's a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, a need for admiration and lack of empathy. Individuals who are narcissistic often have a fragile sense of self-worth, and they really rely on external validation to prop themselves up.
Yeah, that makes total sense. What about Machiavellianism? That one always sounds so scheming to me.
Yeah, it's got this real cunning connotation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Machiavellianism is all about manipulating and exploiting others to achieve your goals. And it's often done with a blatant disregard for morality. So it's basically a strategy of deception and manipulation where the ends justify the means. It's named after Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince in the 16th century. It was like a treatise on how to gain political power and keep it.
So it's like a playbook for social manipulation, like using charm and deceit to get what you want. Okay, so we've got narcissism, we've got Machiavellianism. Now, what about psychopathy? This one has always seemed really mysterious to me.
Yeah, it's definitely the most chilling of the 3. It's characterized by this profound lack of empathy, remorse, and guilt. And, you know, it's often coupled with shallow emotions and impulsivity. While psychopaths are often portrayed as violent criminals in movies and things, they can actually exist in everyday life. And they can be masked by superficial charm and manipulative tendencies. They're really good at exploiting vulnerabilities, and they can be incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands.
Okay, so we've got these 3 dark personality traits linked to dark psychology: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. But the audiobook makes this surprising point that manipulation itself isn't necessarily evil.
Yeah, that's important. It exists on a spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's really the intent that determines whether it's ethical or not. The audiobook distinguishes between negative manipulation, which is driven by selfish motives and aims to harm or control others. And then there's positive manipulation, which is more about ethical persuasion.
So, like, positive manipulation is using psychology to try to nudge someone towards an outcome that's actually good for them?
Exactly. It's about framing your arguments in a way that aligns with the other person's values and motivations. So instead of trying to push your agenda, you find common ground and create a win-win situation.
It's almost like a Jedi mind trick.
Sort of.
But for good.
Yeah, for good.
Wait, have you ever seen the show The Good Place?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Remember Michael the Demon in the first season? He's like trying to manipulate all these people in his fake version of The Good Place.
Right.
But then he starts actually caring about them.
Yeah.
And he ends up kind of using his manipulation skills for good to try to help them.
Exactly. It's like that. You know, like a really skilled doctor who persuades their patient to quit smoking. Not by like scaring them, but by emphasizing the health benefits for their loved ones.
That's so interesting. So it's not about coercion, it's about influence and guidance. So how do we develop these Jedi-like persuasion skills? What kind of techniques does the audiobook highlight?
Well, one technique is understanding your target's motivations and desires. It's about putting yourself in their shoes, understanding what makes them tick, and then tailoring your communication to resonate with those aspirations.
So it's about finding common ground and appealing to their self-interest.
Exactly.
It sounds like effective marketing almost.
Yeah, there are some parallels there for sure. Another powerful technique is appealing to authority figures that your target respects. So if you're trying to persuade someone to make a healthy lifestyle change, you might mention recommendations from doctors or research studies that they trust. Because people are more likely to be swayed by opinions that they perceive as credible and authoritative.
Oh, so like leveraging that halo effect. What other persuasive tricks are hidden in this audiobook toolbox?
Well, here's a really fascinating one. It's the power of vulnerability. Admitting weaknesses before the other person does can actually build trust and credibility. It shows that you're honest and you're not trying to present a perfect facade. And it allows you to control the narrative and potentially disarm the other person by addressing their concerns before they even voice them.
Okay, so it's kind of like saying, hey, I'm not perfect, but here's why I think this is the best course of action, despite these potential drawbacks.
Exactly. It kind of disarms their suspicion and makes you seem more authentic. And speaking of persuasive tactics, let's not forget about the scarcity principle. Creating a sense of urgency or exclusivity can be incredibly compelling. Limited time offers, exclusive deals, or even just highlighting the rarity of an opportunity can really trigger people. It makes them afraid of missing out and prompts them to take action.
Oh yeah, those limited time only sales always get me. But it sounds like the key takeaway here is that we need to use these techniques ethically. We're not talking about manipulation for personal gain. We're talking about influence for mutual benefit.
Exactly. Ethical persuasion is about transparency and respect. You're not trying to trick or coerce anyone into doing something against their will. You're just presenting information and framing your arguments in a way that makes your desired outcome more appealing.
Okay, I think I'm getting the hang of this ethical persuasion thing. Now on to something that always fascinates me, body language. The audiobook emphasizes its crucial role in manipulation.
Yeah, what's really interesting about body language is that it's this constant stream of nonverbal communication. It's often operating beneath our conscious awareness. So our facial expressions, our gestures, our posture, they all send these subtle signals that can either support or contradict our words.
It's like a secret language we're all speaking, even when we're not saying anything. So how do manipulators exploit this secret language?
Well, they're really good at reading and using these nonverbal cues to their advantage. Like, for example, take mirroring. Have you ever noticed how someone subtly mimics your body language when they're trying to build rapport with you? It creates this sense of similarity and connection, and it can make you feel more comfortable and receptive to their message.
Now that you mention it, I have noticed that. It's subtle, but it definitely has an impact.
Exactly. And manipulators are also really skilled at observing head movements. Subtle nods, tilts, and shakes can actually reveal a lot about whether someone agrees, disagrees, or is even bored. And they use this information to adjust their approach, so they can kind of tailor their message to elicit the desired response.
So by becoming more aware of these cues, we can understand the people we're interacting with better, and we can also protect ourselves from potential manipulation.
Absolutely. Another powerful tool in a manipulator's arsenal is eye contact. Eye contact is so powerful for persuasion because it conveys confidence and establishes a connection. But it can also be used manipulatively. Have you ever experienced like that really intense, unwavering stare from someone that makes you feel uncomfortable, almost trapped?
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to exert dominance or control over you. It can really make you feel uneasy and off balance.
Totally.
Yeah, and the audiobook encourages us to be more mindful of our own body language as well. It's not just about reading other people's signals, it's also about understanding how our own nonverbal communication impacts our interactions.
Right, so it's a two-way street. We need to be aware of both the signals that we're sending and the signals that we're receiving.
Exactly. Pay attention to how you hold yourself, how you make eye contact, even the tone of your voice. These subtle cues can have a huge impact on how people perceive you and respond to you.
That's a really good point. I'm definitely going to be more conscious of my own body language now. So with all of this knowledge about manipulation and body language, how can we actually spot a manipulator in the wild? What red flags should we be looking for?
Well, one common tactic is that they'll try to control the environment or the conversation. They might subtly steer the topic towards areas where they feel dominant, or they might try to interrupt you or talk over you. It's all about asserting their power and dominance in the interaction.
So they're basically trying to dictate the terms of engagement.
Exactly. And they're also experts at twisting the truth or selectively sharing information to support their agenda. So they might omit crucial details, exaggerate certain aspects, or even outright lie, just to paint themselves in a favorable light or to discredit others.
It's like they create their own reality.
Yeah.
Try to pull you into it.
Yeah, exactly. Another common tactic is playing the victim to elicit sympathy and manipulate emotions. So they might blame others for their misfortunes, constantly complain about how unfairly they've been treated, or even fabricate stories just to gain your pity and support.
It's a way to avoid taking responsibility for their actions and manipulate others into feeling sorry for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they often use emotional pressure or guilt trips to get what they want. So they might say things like, if you really cared about me, you'd do this, or you're always letting me down. They try to prey on your emotions to manipulate your actions.
It's like emotional blackmail.
It is.
And it can be really effective, especially for people who are naturally empathetic.
Right. And another classic manipulator move is pushing boundaries and testing limits. They might start with small requests and gradually increase their demands, or they might subtly violate your personal space just to see how far they can go without any resistance.
It's a slow creep toward control.
Exactly. And while these behaviors often indicate manipulative tendencies, it's important to remember that not everyone who exhibits these traits is intentionally malicious. Sometimes people are manipulative without even realizing it. They learned these patterns earlier in life as a way to cope with difficult situations.
Yeah, it's not always like some evil mastermind. Sometimes it's just an ingrained behavior pattern that they might not even be aware of.
It's about understanding the underlying motivations and recognizing the patterns, whether they're conscious or unconscious. Yeah, it's about peeling back those layers, and really trying to understand those nuances of human behavior and, just recognizing the signs of manipulation.
Well, speaking of peeling back layers, this audiobook also goes into NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I've always thought of that as like some kind of mind control technique. What is that really all about?
Yeah, NLP often gets a bad rap because people think of it as, mind control. But it's really a set of techniques for understanding and influencing the human mind. And it can be used for good or for evil. It basically explores the connection between our thoughts, our language, and our behavior. And it can be a really powerful tool for personal growth and effective communication.
Okay, so it's not about mind control, but more about harnessing the power of the mind.
Exactly.
But how does it relate to manipulation and persuasion?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Some NLP techniques can definitely be used to influence others. And like we've been talking about, the ethical implications depend on the intent of the person using them. So, for example, there's a technique called anchoring, which involves associating a particular emotional state with a specific trigger, like a touch or a word. So imagine a public speaker who gets nervous before going on stage. They could use anchoring to link a feeling of confidence and calmness to a simple gesture, like touching their ring finger. And whenever they feel anxious, they can trigger that anchor to access that resourceful state.
So it's like having a mental panic button for positive emotions. That could be really useful.
Exactly. And the applications are vast. A salesperson might use anchoring to create a positive association with a product, linking it to feelings of pleasure or satisfaction. A therapist might use it to help a client overcome a phobia by anchoring feelings of safety and security to a particular object or image.
So it's about understanding the mechanics of the mind and using that knowledge to achieve a desired outcome.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. NLP also emphasizes the importance of clear communication and understanding how language shapes our experiences. It's not just about what we say, but how we say it. Like, there's this concept called reframing, which involves shifting your perspective on a situation to change its emotional impact. So, like, imagine you're facing a daunting challenge, like a major career change. Instead of focusing on the potential difficulties, you could reframe it as an exciting opportunity for growth and learning. You're basically transforming fear into anticipation.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
It's like taking control of your internal dialogue and choosing to see the world through a more empowering lens.
Exactly. Reframing can be incredibly powerful in overcoming limiting beliefs and achieving goals. By changing our language and our perspective, we can literally change our reality.
This is blowing my mind. NLP sounds like an amazing tool for personal growth and effective communication. But you mentioned its potential for misuse. How could it be used for manipulation?
Well, like any powerful tool, NLP can be wielded for good or for evil. A skilled manipulator might use NLP techniques to subtly influence others for their own selfish gain, without any regard for the other person's well-being. They might use anchoring to link their presence to feelings of trust and security, making their target more susceptible to their suggestions. Or they might use reframing to distort the target's perception of reality, subtly manipulating their beliefs and values to serve the manipulator's agenda.
It's like the dark side of the force.
It kind of is.
So how do we protect ourselves from NLP manipulation?
Well, the best defense is awareness. Understand the basic principles of NLP. And be mindful of how people might be using language and subtle cues to influence your thoughts and behavior. Pay attention to how you feel when someone is trying to persuade you. If you feel pressured or manipulated, Trust your gut instinct.
So it's all about being mindful and observant and trusting our intuition.
Exactly. And remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about these techniques, the better equipped you'll be to navigate those complexities of human interaction and to protect yourself from manipulation.
Okay, so we've got NLP demystified. But this audiobook doesn't stop there. It goes on to explore these manipulative personalities in detail, like really diving deep into their motivations and behaviors. Where do we even begin with that?
Well, one of the things I found fascinating was how the audiobook explored the developmental roots of manipulation. It explained how these behaviors often originate in childhood as a way of coping with unmet needs or challenging situations. So, for example, a child who was constantly criticized or neglected might learn to manipulate others to get attention or validation.
So it's like a survival mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. They develop these patterns to navigate a difficult environment and get their needs met.
And then as they grow up, these patterns become more ingrained. And they carry them into adulthood, impacting their relationships and interactions. Right, so they basically learn to manipulate as a kid.
Yeah.
And then they just keep doing it as an adult.
Exactly. And as these individuals grow up, these manipulative patterns can become more sophisticated and insidious. They might become masters at reading people, identifying vulnerabilities and exploiting them for their own gain. But the audiobook also makes a really important distinction, highlighting the existence of what it calls positive manipulative personalities.
Positive manipulators.
Yeah.
That sounds like an oxymoron. How can manipulation be positive?
Well, it all comes down to intent. These individuals might exhibit manipulative behaviors, but their motivations are ultimately rooted in a desire to help others or to achieve some greater good. So, for instance, a highly driven leader might use their understanding of psychology and persuasion to inspire their team to achieve ambitious goals, pushing them beyond their perceived limitations. Or a loving parent might use gentle manipulation to encourage their child to develop healthy habits, nudging them towards a path of well-being.
Okay, so it's not about selfish gain. It's about guiding others towards positive outcomes. It's almost like using manipulation as a force for good.
It is.
Like a Jedi master.
Right.
Using their powers to help others reach their full potential.
Exactly. It's about distinguishing between manipulative behaviors that are driven by self-interest and those that are driven by a genuine desire to help others. It's about recognizing that fine line between ethical persuasion and manipulation.
Okay, so the audiobook breaks down all these different manipulative personalities, the good and the bad. Can you walk us through some of the key types?
Sure. Let's start with the classic narcissist. They have that inflated sense of self-importance and a constant need for admiration. And they often use flattery, charm, and even guilt trips to manipulate others into feeding their ego and meeting their needs.
They're like master manipulators.
They are.
Playing on people's emotions to get what they want.
Exactly. Then we have the psychopath, probably the most chilling of the manipulative personalities. They're characterized by that profound lack of empathy, remorse, and guilt, making them incredibly adept at exploiting and manipulating others without a shred of conscience.
It's like they lack the basic wiring for human connection.
It really is.
That's scary.
Yeah, it can be, especially when you consider their ability to blend in and mimic social cues, so they can be very hard to spot.
Yeah, you never know who you're dealing with.
Right. The audiobook also explores the Machiavellian personality, inspired by Niccolo Machiavelli, the author of The Prince. These individuals are highly strategic and cunning. They view the world as a chessboard, where manipulation and deception are the tools of the trade.
Like they're always plotting and scheming.
Yeah.
Using people as pawns to advance their own agenda.
Exactly. Then there's the compulsive controller, who's driven by this deep-seated need for control and dominance. In all aspects of their life, they might use intimidation threats or emotional manipulation to maintain their sense of power and keep others in line.
So they're like the bullies and dictators.
Yeah.
The ones who thrive on controlling everyone and everything around them.
Exactly. And finally, we have a personality type that might surprise you. The highly sensitive person or empath. These individuals, with their heightened empathy and sensitivity to other people's emotions, can actually be particularly vulnerable to manipulation.
That's ironic.
It is.
Their greatest strength, their empathy, becomes their Achilles heel.
Exactly. Manipulators often target empathic individuals, using their good nature against them.
So we've got this whole spectrum of manipulative personalities, each with their own unique tactics and motivations.
Right.
It's like a psychological rogues gallery. So how do we protect ourselves from becoming victim?
Well, the first line of defense is awareness. Understand the common traits and behaviors associated with these personality types so you can recognize the warning signs early on. Pay attention to how people make you feel.
No.
If you consistently feel drained, manipulated, or controlled in someone's presence, that's a huge red flag.
It's like our gut is telling us something's off.
Exactly. And you have the right to set boundaries. You don't have to put up with manipulative behavior, no matter who it's coming from.
Okay, this is getting kind of heavy. Can we talk about something more empowering? Like the audiobook ends by offering some advice on how to become more persuasive ourselves, but in an ethical way, not like the dark side stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The audiobook makes a really strong case that if you understand these principles of persuasion, it can actually help you become a better communicator. And you can build stronger, healthier relationships. So it's about using these skills for good, to inspire and uplift others, not to manipulate or control them.
So like a Jedi Master of communication, not a Sith Lord.
Exactly.
I love that analogy.
One of the key principles the audiobook emphasizes is the power of framing. So it's about presenting information in a way that really resonates with your audience, aligning with their values and their motivations. Instead of just pushing your own agenda, you try to find common ground. Highlight the benefits that matter most to the other person.
Can you give me an example of that? Like, how would I use this Jedi mind trick in real life?
Okay, so let's say you're trying to convince your friend to join you for a yoga class. Instead of focusing on your own desire to have a workout buddy, you could frame it in terms of the stress relief and the mental clarity that yoga offers, which are benefits that your friend values.
So appealing to their needs, not just my own.
Exactly. Another important principle the audiobook highlights is building rapport and trust, because people are much more likely to be persuaded by someone they like and respect. So it's about establishing that connection, showing genuine interest in the other person's perspective, and creating this atmosphere of mutual respect.
That makes sense. No one likes to feel like they're being lectured to or manipulated.
Exactly. The audiobook also talks about active listening, truly hearing and understanding the other person's point of view, even if you don't agree with it. It's about finding common ground, acknowledging their concerns, and building that bridge of understanding.
So ethical persuasion is more about collaboration and understanding than about winning an argument or forcing your opinion on someone.
Exactly. And finally, the audiobook encourages us to be confident and assertive in our communication. So believe in the value of what you're saying. Express yourself clearly and persuasively. It's not about being aggressive or overbearing. It's about communicating your ideas with conviction and clarity.
I feel like we're learning to be Jedi masters of communication, using our powers for good.
I love that.
Yeah.
And remember, ethical persuasion isn't about manipulating or controlling other people. It's about connecting with them on a deeper level, understanding their needs and motivations, and then presenting your ideas in a way that's both compelling and respectful. It's about building bridges, not walls.
I love that. We've covered so much in this deep dive, from dark psychology to ethical persuasion. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of human behavior.
Me too.
It's been an incredible journey.
It has.
Well, as we wrap up this fascinating exploration into the human psyche, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Now that you've learned all about manipulation, dark psychology, and NLP, how are you going to use this knowledge to navigate your own interactions? And how will you use it to become a more effective and ethical communicator?
That's a great question. Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and may the force of ethical persuasion be with you.